This is For the Love of Italy, a happy hour, and we meet every Friday of the month and we talk about all things Italian. Sometimes we share photos, we talk about Italian American history. We interview special guests, and today we have Robert Gaglio here with us. And we bring our glass of wine. Does anybody bring wine this evening? All right, we got one. I didn't bring mine this evening.
in the family glass, which I think was not so much for wine. I think my mother said it was a bathroom glass, but what the heck?
It'll work.
It's still family. All right, just as a reminder, try and keep your audio muted, unless you're going to speak. So lessen the chance of any kind of feedback that will affect, everyone else's experience. I'm going to go ahead and just give it over to you, Robert, to do your thing. And then I have a few comments there at the end, and we can talk about a few other things. So this is Robert Gaglio of Italian Culinary Tours.
Hi. Yeah, thank you very much, Melanie, for having me on your program.
Thank you.
I met you through a series of things. I think it was a podcast I watched that you were on. What's her name? Kathy
McCabe.
McCabe.
Dream of Italy.
Yeah, and that's how I found you. And as you know, I'm trying to get my Italian citizenship. My grandfather was born in a town called Montelebre, which is about 40-minute drive to Monreale, Natalie, when we were talking about that town. Monreale is a beautiful Sicilian town, very influenced through the Norman period. And that's how we met. And then I found out that you did more than just kind of help people get their citizenship. You've had a long career in genealogy, helping people. And I think we connected because knowing my genealogy really changed my life. And it had a huge impact on who I was and who I became. Because I have not been a tour operator for very long. It's been about 7 years, really in the last 5, going at it full time and very successful up until the pandemic. But that's just a kind of a bump in the road. We'll be back at it next year for sure. But yeah, it really impacted my life. And you said, well, how does genealogy impact your life? And knowing, where you're from, and us Italian Americans are lucky that came from that wave, from that turn of the century and then some after the war. We're lucky because we can go really 1-2 generation to who our ancestors are. You can't do that a lot with folks that have been in the United States for a long period of time because it just gets all lost, multi generations. And my mother was born in Sicily, and my father's parents were born in Sicily. So that's a real short timeline. Even though it's 100 years, that's nothing in genealogy. And I was able to, at 50, I was kind of a midlife crisis, I guess. Went through the first crash. Believe it or not, I've been in 2 crashes. One was the banking crash, the financial world, because I was in banking for 24 years. I had my whole career in wealth management and in that side of some commercial banking. And 2008, 2009 was really a horrific period if you are living in Florida working in the banking industry. So that was my first crash dealing with, where it really affected my work. And I think going through that crash, it kind of really made me think about life. And at that point, my kids were older. They were pretty much launched at the end of that period. And I thought, well, I should go see where my grandfather was born. And that was the first trip I took in the summer of 2012. I took my son and he had graduated high school. So I said, let's go see where my grandfather's from. And we did that. In the town of Montelebre, there's probably a third of the population has the name Gaglio, Gaglio. Didn't know that at the time, but there's so funny. I have a cousin who has a cousin named Gaglio, but we're not related. It's like, how is that possible? But it's possible. So it's a very little town, and my grandfather came to the United States in 2000, or I'm sorry, 1912. He was 17 years old, and back then, that's the big migration of Italians out of southern Italy, mostly during that period, and wound up in New York City, and then wound up in Detroit, and that's where I grew up. I spent most of my life in the Detroit area. Very Italian, like Pittsburgh, other places like that, Chicago, big New York, lots of Italian influence. My mother came when she was 2 years old in 1925, and the town, a very small town in Sicily, they came. Interesting, because they kind of came and went back and went back. You find that, you've probably found that in your work, that
Right.
these
The birds
Italians,
of passage.
it
Right.
wasn't just coming and then staying. Some of them went back and then they came back. Well, that was the case for my mother. She has siblings that were born in the United States that were older. Then there was 11-year period where my grandfather was separated. He was in New York, and he took the family back to Sicily, and he couldn't return. Maybe World War I broke out. I think that's probably, that would have been a huge impediment to going back. And he ended up going back in 1920, 21 or so. And then my mother was born in 1925. And then 2 years later, she came. So she has sisters that were already American, that were born there. And then she ultimately got her citizenship through that process. But they wound up in Little Italy, the Bronx. So Arthur Avenue, that was, their life. That was very Sicilian back then.
Very much so.
Probably 90% of the people there were Sicilians. And that was, as a kid, always fun going to get lemon ice and hanging out with my mother's family in that part. But for me, the genealogy was like, I was close to my mom and dad, and I grew up a Sicilian household. But it would have probably been even more so if I was in New York City, because of the heavy concentration. But I've always had a tie to like my mother's cooking, and I love cooking Italian food. And so whatever happened in 2008, 2009, going through that very difficult period, there was a 5-year period after that where I found roots in a place called Sarasota, Florida, working for a bank that I worked for back in Detroit. I was very blessed to do that. But I just kind of felt there was a need to go to Italy and see where my grandfather was born, and I did that. Well, then it was like, well, I want to go back. And my father had written on the back of a Val coupon his aunt and her kids and then their kids. And so he was like 80 some years old, 87 years old, and he wrote all these names and did a pretty good job. And they were there. My parents were there in 1974, but that was it. They only had one shot. And I wound up pulled into the town with my son, and I just remember it was a really hot day. And there was a street with our name on it, right? Because so many Gaglios were in that town. And I stopped there. I said to my son, well, this is the best place to start looking. Because this was sort of like, I think Facebook was out, but I wasn't using it. And I had no really way. My parents were older, and I had one cousin I knew that would go to Sicily, but she never returned my call. And by the time I did the trip, I had no way of phoning these people. So I look at this lady, is like out of a movie. She's sitting on the stoop. It's hot. So the shade from the buildings, this narrow street, and it's a mountain town. So the wind kind of comes through. So it's a cool place to sit. And I asked her, hey, I show her my driver's license, my name. Can you help me find these people? They live here, and I want to find them. And she calls her cousin, or her daughter, I beg your pardon. Her daughter comes down the stairs and gets her phone and says, Cugina Inglese. And so that she called her cousin, who wasn't her cousin by blood, it was a cousin by marriage. And this lady comes up, she's about 5'4", with a ponytail, and she comes up to me and says, "Hi, I'm Joanna. I'm from Windsor, Ontario," which is just on the other side of the bridge of Detroit, right?
Right.
Windsor, Ontario. And I looked at her, I go, first of all, I was expecting this woman's cousin. Well, it was her cousin. She married this woman's cousin. She goes, "Yeah, I was 19 and I went on vacation because college wasn't for me. And I married my husband here. I met my husband and married him. That was 19 years ago." So she proceeds to take me around town to find these people. And she's like, "Well, this one I think works at my kid's school. Let's see what we can find out." So we go to like the butcher shop, went to this pizza shop, and the fellow there is like, "Oh, he was Jean Renzo was here for lunch today." Yeah. Turned out that pizza parlor owner, he spent 15 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we were talking about that a little bit. His time that he spent there, but he wanted to raise his kids in Sicily, so they moved back when the kids were little. So Joanna, this is a very long story, but she was able to find the folks, and we met with them, and that was very moving, to see your cousins, and they invite me. I remember we got there before John Renzo got home, and when he got there, I told Joanna not to. I didn't want to bother him, I didn't want to inconvenience him, and she's like, "Oh no, he had a pencil at that point. He was like making corrections of like spouses' names and who was passed away." And she goes, "Oh no, he was like 17 when your parents came. He's very like, this is very interesting for him. So that's kind of how it turned out. And I've actually kind of written about this stuff through the years. And COVID has done one thing for me, is it's put me down to get many chapters done. So I'm almost ready. I've written a book about, or writing a book about the whole experience the last 8 years. And that was why I wanted to go back every year. So the genealogy was the reason I wanted to go back every year. I wanted to meet these people. And, my father's second cousin, it's a bit distant, but it's really not. And I'll say another thing a little bit shorter in a minute about that. But when you see like your cousin, like I'm making this dish right now, caponata, which is very Sicilian. When you see your cousin peeling away, on celery, when you pull out the string, you
Strings.
folks do
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Like I was doing that one time at a class. It was an event I was doing, and someone's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, you don't pull out the string that's in there, because it's not very good to chew on." And I learned that from my mom. And when I saw this cousin doing that, I'm like, and then later this lady saying, "What are you doing?" I didn't realize most people don't know to pull that out, and that it's just what you do. And I'm sure other chefs do it, but it's very Sicilian, that kind of thing, in making the food. And it just, I really, even though that person is my dad's second cousin, which is a bit distance from me, it's still very, very family to me. The very, just being with them did so much for me at that point in life. And I think if I would have met them 10 years before that, when I had little kids, they were 10 years old running around, I don't know if my mind would have been really focused on being open to that experience, if that makes any sense. Because,
Mhm.
all the
Yes.
pressure of the mortgage and the kids' tuition and dental, braces and this and that, and just stress of life, would I have been open to like that experience? Maybe not. So, because people ask me, "Don't you wish you would have done this sooner?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I could have done it sooner, because I had to learn the lessons of life and
Right.
then go and meet because you don't know who you are until you know where you're from. And my mom was from Sicily, and my father's parents were from Sicily. And there's a reason I wound up in Florida, because of the sun and the water. I mean, that's why I love living in Florida. So I kind of learned, about myself. And then wanting to go back every year, I had a nice position. It was a corporate job. I had good vacation time. I could take 3 weeks off if I wanted to go in that sort of slow period of us in Florida, because we're really busy in the winter and not as busy in late summer, fall. But as I was going, I started to bring people with me, and it was a lot of fun. And there's another story of how I started the tour business, and it was really just a fluke. My boss at the time invited me to stay with him in Tuscany with his family, and I thought that was odd. Like, what do you mean? Does your wife know that you asked me, because you have teenage kids there and this is your family vacation? And he saw how enthusiastic I was about going to Sicily and meeting my family for the first time. For some reason, he reached out to me and invited me to his vacation in Tuscany, which was this beautiful. You all been to Tuscany? Those stone houses in the Chianti region area. And I said, I'll go if I can be the chef, or if I can be the cook. I said that I'll go. And what we did was we would go out to the market and buy things and come back, and I would cook for them. And I was like, this was heaven for me, And the wife was like, after Wednesday, she's like, you can come with us anytime, because she didn't have to cook or wash
Feed
dishes.
me, yes.
But it made me think, like, I should invite some people I know and do this next year. And I did that. And then the next thing I thought, well, I should just do this as a little business on my vacation. And then after like 2 years of doing it, people are like, this is the best experience I've ever had. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should just do this full time. And that's what happened in 2016 or 2015. I said goodbye to the corporate world and just focused on bringing people to Tuscany and Sicily, and trying to get people to the Dolomites, because that's a beautiful area and unique area too. But COVID got in the way of our first tour, so hopefully next year that'll get on track. But it's just been magic over the last. I would have never had the experiences if I would have just gone on vacation there. I've probably lived in Italy in the last 5 years about a year. So the last, by staying, well, you know what that's like. You're
Yeah.
probably there that often. So, it's made me a really terrible driver here in the United States, but a very good driver in Italy.
True.
Like, people are like, how can you drive here? I'm like, I love driving here. And then when I come back, I get myself into trouble because I'm not in Italy.
Yeah, maybe a
things
little
like
bit
red
more
light.
aggressive on the road.
Well, there's just not a stop sign to be found in
Yeah.
Sicily. There's one or two lights maybe, but
Have you ever driven in Palermo? It's kind of a
yeah.
suggestion, any kind of stop sign or light.
It's just a suggestion. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's just I think the genealogy is so important to people's lives, and those who can really trace it back to where they're from, they should really go back and see what their grandparents experienced, or great grandparents, and what that's all about. Helps me too as a teacher. I do classes. I teach classes about Italy and various regions, and helps me understand it better. Like, I'll have people who really don't know, like, they don't even know where Sicily is. Like, it's hard to believe, like, hey, that's the soccer ball. How can you not know that's, there's the foot and the soccer ball? But they don't even know where Sicily is. They don't know that it's an island. And I was teaching a class on Sicily, the history, and we get to a point where we're talking about that great migration from 1890 to 1920 or so.
20, yeah.
You know the numbers. I mean, there's like 5 million people
Oh, yeah. There's like
from
6 million that
just
went to Canada.
that period. Just that period came to North America over that period. And that's a huge migration when the country itself only existed for 40 years and it only had about 25 million people in it. So when you see, 5 million people leaving, that's a huge migration that will never be matched ever, even today, because of our political situations and stuff. That scenario will never be repeated. That type of migration, and I remember in one class, a lady said, "Well, why did people leave like that?" And it really came home to me when I was looking for my grandfather's birth certificate. And my uncle had the wrong year. He gave me the wrong year. My dad had passed at that point. And I go into the city hall and she's like, "I just don't see it here. It's not here." And, she didn't think the year before or whatever. I knew that there was this padre in town, Father Randazzo. He had given me a gift once of my genealogy from my grandfather all the way to like 1680 in that little town of Montelebre. You
Wow.
think of it, they never moved. They lived there for all those years. And it was this huge tree. And I remember bringing it at that time, my dad was alive and I brought my father was very interested in that stuff. He did his own little family tree years ago. And so I remembered this Father Randazzo. So I said to my friend Carlo, "Can we go see Father Randazzo? Maybe he can help us." Sure enough, that he was like that was his hobby. He had a database of all these people that lived in Montelebre. So
Wow.
he's a padre that just keeps track of everybody. And it pretty much ends when my grandfather left. He's got nothing. Like the next time I go, I want to bring him the data of us here in America so he can fill it out. But the point of the story is, why did they move? He begins to show me all my great grandmother's children. Now, I know that my grandfather, there were 5 siblings, okay? 2 stayed and 3 came to America. Well, there were 10 siblings. 5 of them were born and lived a couple days, 12 months, 8 months. So those 5 kids that were born, they were born and they were given names and they died within a 1-year period. The poverty has to be really bad when you have that level of mortality,
Right.
sickness,
The nutrition
the
and
nutritional. There
right.
just wasn't food in stores. You couldn't feed yourself.
Which
You
is
couldn't
why
feed
so
your
many
family.
left, especially out of Sicily. The poverty was just intense.
Yeah. So my answer to the lady was, that brought it home for me because my grandfather must have left because he saw that how hard it was for his parents. The house he lived in, there were 5 people. That was the size of a 1-car garage, in this little town. It is a garage. My grandfather's home is now a garage because the person above it probably bought it and turned it in because it was on the ground floor, turned it into a garage. So he must have just, like all these millions of people, just realized that it has to be something better than this. So all those, and it's funny because their names are the same. Like my Uncle Joe, or I beg your pardon, my Uncle Sam, the firstborn was Salvador. So they just gave him the name because he was the next male to be born. They just used that same name. You
Right.
probably see
That's
that a lot
common.
in your work, probably with the Irish, and it's probably a very family kind of thing, not just for Italians. But so yeah, knowing the genealogy it just made a huge impact in my life, and it's been a blessing because it's been now out of the corporate world and just spending all that time and all these wonderful people I've met, the friends I've made there, my cousins. The younger cousins are like kids for me. They're kind of like children for me because I have one who's a finance major he's got a master's in finance, and you don't hang around Palermo with a master's in finance, right? You got to go to London in his case, or you go to Madrid or Germany,
Milan.
Milan. So he went to London. So we hang out. I'll fly to London first. He'll take me around and we'll meet up in Barcelona. And to have a young kid who's, 29 years old in Barcelona, who's got friends from Montelebre in Barcelona, because all the kids are all over Europe, right? Those Sicilians are all over. So him and I are like, we're having a blast, and he's like a son to me, It was so funny. He was asking me, he sees there's a golf course where he lives. And I'm like, you live in London. How can there be a golf course? That doesn't make any sense, Because there's a golf course, right? That train station and bus station in that area where there's this is in London, where there's like a mass a soccer stadium too. Well, it turns out it's a driving range, right? So he calls it a golf course, and he was very like, it intrigued him, and so
It's
I
not a
said,
concept they have.
yeah, like a golf course in Sicily. The kid's never even had a club in his hand. And he goes, I go, do you want to try it? You want to go try it? So we literally go and get a bucket of balls, and I'm teaching him how to hit a golf ball. And he's almost 30 years old and never played golf. And he's actually making contact. And I'm the last person you want to get a golf lesson from, trust me. So he's knocking the ball up. I'm taking video of him, and I'm sending it to his mom in Montelebre, who's never been to London. She hasn't gone to see her son in London, because one, they don't have the resources, and two, they're just not like that. They're not, those older generations, they're not like, they just don't. And so I send her the video. She gets a kick out of it, and I really feel that, Ricardo and I are close because he doesn't have his dad. His dad died when he was 10. And maybe there was a reason why I got on this path, and I'm in his life. We WhatsApp all the time. He can relate to me because I have a finance degree. I was in the business world. It's what he wants to be. There's that, and these are the kind of experiences that I've had, and I don't want to go on and on, but there's one real special one, because when I went the first time, one of my cousins, Luciana, said to me, next time you come, you stay in my home, the home your parents stayed when I was 8 years old. And my heart just kind of melted, right? So she was living in the house in Palermo. It was an apartment, really, that she was a kid. And she stayed there. She's the youngest of the four family members. And I said, okay. So the following year, I'd gone to Mandello Beach. You know where that is, like a beach outside of Palermo, and got a hotel, because I learned that you need to get a hotel room on the beach if you want to enjoy the beach. Because if you just go to the beach, it's a totally different experience, which isn't a bad experience. Well, it can be, but it's not, it's not the most relaxing experience doing it that way. But having your own, hotel on the beach is nice as far as in getting relaxation. If you want excitement, go to the beach. It's much different than Sarasota, trust me. But anyways, for 2 of the days, I said, oh, I'll stay with you, Luciana. And she became my connection to that family in Montelebre. So every year I would go, I would contact her. She would get the party. There'd be 30 people. We'd be making pizzas in the outside oven. They're teaching me how to make, macaroni and caponata and all kinds of stuff. I'm cooking for them. Like, wow, I got to cook a meal for them. I mean, how fun is that? And through the years, we just got really close. And then I finally realized, like, there's no way Luciana and her kids could come to the United States. They just don't have the extra coin. The daughter was just starting college. She was a teacher, and, they're just not paid a lot. There's not a lot of extras. And one day I look in, I was talking to Elba, the daughter, and I see this poster of Disney. And she's like 18 at the time. I'm like, you like Disney? And she's like, oh, yeah. I go, do you watch all those movies when you were a kid? Oh, yeah. And she had been to Disney in Paris, but she was a big fan. And I said to myself, for a gift to me, I would bring Luciana and the two kids to Sarasota because I was alone. I mean, when I had the kids, I was married and living in Detroit. My house was always Christmas and Thanksgiving. I could cook a turkey with my eyes closed, and when an Italian has family over for dinner, that's 25 people. It's
True.
it's not it's not five people. It's 20, 30 people. So I was alone for many years in Sarasota, and I said, darn it, I'm going to have family with me this Christmas. And so I did, plane tickets. I even did like 4 nights at Disney where they could stay. I said, you could stay. I go, I'll come one day. That's all I can take. Uh, I mean, we go to Europe to see real castles, and Europeans come here to see a fake one. It's so funny, but it was fun. They enjoyed it. They were together. We celebrated Christmas. Well, she teaches me how to make tiramisu on Christmas Eve, which was going to be for Christmas dinner, right? And it's fabulous. It's the best tiramisu I've ever had. I make it part of my repertoire. So fast forward about 3 years, I make it part of my teaching class and my events, and everyone tells me it's the best they've ever had. Well, Luciana passes away with pancreatic cancer. Okay, so I lose this cousin who I only knew for 5 years, right? I lose this beautiful person, but I was really close to the kids. And when I went back, Elba actually, she changed her degree to travel tourism communication, because I think with the Disney experience and seeing all those hotels and how all that was working, and I don't know, she just wasn't happy doing what she was doing in Palermo. But she graduated from college, and Luciana missed that. She didn't make it to that graduation. She died in April, and the graduation was in end of May. And so here we are in Montelebre in Luciana's house with my cousin Alba, and it's very quiet. It's sad. It's my first time back. I'm not having her mom there. And I say to her, "Are you okay? Did you talk to your? Did you talk to your? Do you have a counselor you talk to? Is it?" She goes, "Well, my father lost his mom when he was 18, and my boyfriend's dad died last year, and we talk." And I said, "Okay." And then she says, "But I don't know how to make my mom's tiramisu." So, here I am, like, what? Like, here I get to teach her how her mom taught me how to make tiramisu, because she was like 21 at the time, and that slipped away. She didn't really watch her mom do it. She just ate it. And there
It's
we
amazing.
were making tiramisu in her mom's kitchen. And she just, while we were doing it, she's like, I feel my mom when I'm with you. And I think, you know, there's a purpose. And I think
Yeah.
that was the purpose, that connection, that reconnecting the family, how important. And so whenever I get compliments on the tiramisu, I always forward the email to Elba and say, see, your mom is with me all the time. So it's a beautiful thing to find out where you're from, and I feel blessed that I was able to do that and then turn it into a business, because I think that's why my business is successful, is because I didn't come from the travel industry. I came from like wealth management and dealing with people's lives and
Mhm.
issues and what's important to them and family and planning for their family. And I also come from a consumer standpoint. I know what I don't like. I don't like being put on a bus and taken to somewhere to buy jewelry or wasting time. And I know what I like. And my boss, by taking me to Tuscany, really kind of taught me. Like, he was a really world traveler, and he really taught me some things. So out of thin air, I just started to do this thing where we get a villa, we get a staff and a chef, we get really top-notch tour guides, not the kind that with the umbrella taking people off cruise ships, but people who just work with one or two, 4 people, 8 people, top of the shelf tour guides, drivers that are funny and can speak English, and then you find these beautiful locations, and it's so much different than a hotel. it's like you're living there. And I think the magic of what I've been able to do is I knew what it was like to be brought into a family in Italy, to be served dinner, to be part of their family. And I replicate that as much as I can for these guests that I bring. Because we don't just go to a restaurant. We either cook in the home with our own chef, or we'll go to a location where it's a family that has a winery for the last 5 generations. And they don't do food, they don't do wine tours. They just let us come there because they're my friends, and they serve us food from there. I had one client ask, how many do you do a lot of these tours? And the grandma was like, the granddaughter's interpreting, and the granddaughter says, oh no, we only do this for Robert. So it's not a commercial thing. This is like
Mhm.
this is like you're living there, you're going to go visit a friend. And I think that's because I have this connection from my heritage, and I'm also a business person, and I know what high level service is. The combination of the two, because so much travel is, it can be stressful and not fun. I remember when I was first starting, a friend of mine said, I did a 14-day cruise in the Mediterranean, and she goes, I only remember half of it. Like, you don't remember half of it. I mean, because it's like, get off the ship, get on the ship, go, 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 wait, and this. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So I
It's
looked
kind of
at it like,
stressful.
yeah, I looked at it like, well, let's do this casual where we just wake up and you come down in your slippers and we eat breakfast, and then we leave at 9:30, we come back at 4. We do more in less time, and then they get time to just sit by the pool and drink wine, or be in the kitchen with the chef, and write down what the chef's doing, or
Mhm.
so it's just a really niche thing that it all came about because I wanted to see where my grandfather was from.
Right.
And I think the work that you do is fabulous, because if you could teach people where they're from, it's an amazing thing. It's a gift. Yeah.
Yeah, and I find it amazing for myself that I've been able to take my heritage and make it into a business that I love to do.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was working for the state of North Carolina prior to this. Something totally different.
It's
And
it's it's amazing. Like, you and I
Mhm.
have the same experience. It's like you do that, you learn about it, and then you've turned it into your career for
Mhm.
15 years.
Yeah,
It's
it's
really cool.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear you talk about your family and just how much finding your relatives has influenced you.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I do wish my parents, see, I'm the youngest of 5. I was born in 62. So my parents were much older. And as I began to do this, they began to lose their ability to travel. And I wasn't able to share any of this over there. On my website, there's a story called Assisi. And my mother would always ask me, did you go to Assisi? Did you go to Assisi? And for 5 years, I'd say, no, Mom, it wasn't on my path. So the year I finally did, I brought home a rosary from Assisi. There's a little guy in a cubbyhole making his rosaries, a little
Oh, neat.
craftsman. And I brought one home for her. Well, she waited for me to come home, because that was it. She died like 2 months later.
Oh my goodness.
Um, and and we put the rosary in the coffin, and my sister's like, no, you can't bury that with her. You got to keep that. So now that rosary gets hung up on a nail just above the light switch in Tuscany. And every time I turn that light on in the morning to make coffee, and every time I turn it off when they're done with their dinner, 12 o'clock, uh, I say goodbye to my mom, and I say good morning to my mom. So, it's my mom wanted me to go to Assisi. And when I did, it was moving, because then I realized, wow, this is why people come. It's such a beautiful and amazing story that a man could have walked away from all his wealth and just
Mhm.
worked for people. So I got it. I understood what Assisi was after going there. So,
Because in a
yeah.
sense, you walked away from your career.
I did.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't make the kind of money I used to make, and but I don't pay the taxes I used to pay either. So
True.
yeah, and I do have the book I'm writing. It's called Freedom to Wander, and by doing what I'm doing, it's given me that gift to just wander through not just Italy but Europe too. You know, I've been to some great places because I would always go. I'd always tell my travel person, book me the cheapest ticket to Europe because I've never been to Europe, and so every year she would, be London, Amsterdam, Nice, so many places, Barcelona, because it was like a blank sheet of paper for me. I had never been to Europe until I went to see my grandparents' town in 2012. So I would always go to somewhere first and then do my tours and then go somewhere after, Paris. Yeah, so it's been a great experience. So to be able to wander, to be able to just not just go on vacation when you have those 4 or 5, 6 weeks. I mean, I was lucky. I had 6 weeks. Most people only have 2 weeks,
Right.
but it still
Or
wasn't enough.
1 week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still 6 weeks. Still, I could not have gotten the relationships, the friends, my family. If there were times when I would just by myself, just drive a car. I've driven about 50,000 miles through Italy. I've seen more of Italy than most Italians. I really have. And do you know Stanley Tucci, the TV show?
Oh,
You've
yes.
seen that? I get to do that. I get to go to the home of the restaurant owner, or the winemaker's home. I get to do what Tucci does. It's just such a different because you're not on vacation. You're living part of your life with your work, and it brings you there. And Melanie, you had the same experience in the north. I'm sure you spent a lot of time there. There's all kinds of friends you've made through the years, and
Oh, yeah,
uh,
definitely.
it, it,
I find it
it
fascinating. You were talking about how when you went the first time and you stood under that street sign with your name on it and,
mhm,
talked to somebody. That is so Italian, where they will spend the time with a stranger and,
mhm,
call up the
mhm,
cousin or, the
mhm.
teacher who works, with their
Yeah,
daughter and actually
yeah,
take that time for a
yeah,
stranger. It's
yeah.
fascinating.
It
That
was
part of
funny
their
that
psyche.
the girl that ended up helping me, spent her first 19 years in Windsor, Ontario. It was funny because I asked her, I said, I don't want to inconvenience you. And she's like, oh no, they call me the Americana because I speak English, Americano, like Americana because she's a female. They call me Americana because I speak English, but I'm really from Canada. But you're right. When I was in John Renzo's house, they broke out the gelato. It was like,
Mhm.
I'm a guest. I'm honored. They were honoring me for being there, and it's so true. It's so pleasant, and that's not true for unfortunately the horrors of war in places like Poland. A lot of Jewish people went back, and they just wanted to see. They didn't want any rights to property and things like that, and they were not treated well when they went back. A lot of those people, they were like worried that these people had lived there a couple generations, and
Ask for their
um,
property back. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, some of them probably could have got their property back, but it's not that way in Italy. It was very open, very, they just treated you like blood. And one of
Hmm.
the reasons I wanted to say earlier, I brought this up, like they are our cousins. I don't care that it's my dad's third cousin or second cousin, because here I am. I bring my brother to Palermo, and my cousin Vita is taking us through her some photographs, and there was a photograph book of her wedding. Well, my brother Joe looks at a photo of Vita. She was 18 at the time. It's a profile picture. He pulls on his iPhone a picture of his daughter. It's exactly the same picture. Eyebrows, bump in the nose right here, profile, skin color. He was like, oh my God, this is my daughter. And that was my dad's
Genetics.
second cousin. So in Carla, my niece, she's even further removed from my grandfather, right? And grandparents, but it doesn't matter, it's in there. So yeah,
Wow.
so that's fun too. Bringing my brothers and sisters there is like, I'm a regular, they know me. And then when I get to bring, oh gosh, what's the term? Oh, my sister said in a Sicilian word, sushi, sushi. I think it's like a Sicilian saying. And my sister said it to, like, what does that mean? She's asking my cousins, and they burst out laughing. Okay, because it's said when someone asks you a question and you have no idea what the answer is. You're almost like saying, how would I know? It's sort of like that. And my dad would say that to my mom, like, she's asking, nagging him or something, and he would say that. So they were cracking up because it's a Sicilian word to begin with. They don't really speak Sicilian in Sicily as much anymore, especially the younger kids. But the younger kids were cracking up. But to bring your sisters there and introduce them to them, and to share it, it's really special. Yeah.
Well, were you going to cook something tonight?
Oh yeah. Let's do that. Kind of a makeshift cooking class here. I'm going to turn on the stove. Caponata is a dish that, if you go to Sicily, which sounds like a few of you have been, it is on the table of the restaurant. Usually, every restaurant you go to has it as an appetizer or such. Now, my recipe is not really 100% my cousin's, because I put carrots in it, and it doesn't have carrots in it. But I don't know. I like carrots in it. But there's celery. Let me switch off my background so you can see what we're doing.
Celery with the strings pulled out.
Celery with the string pulled out. We chop that up. And then also pine nuts. So we have pine nuts.
Very typical Italian. Pine nuts and everything.
There's olives. Okay. And I mentioned celery, and then I put carrots in it. And there's also capers that go in it. And I went shopping today and I totally forgot the capers, so I'm not going to have capers. There's also tomato, and I prepared like a little garlic and a little tomato sauce. I don't know if I can show you the sauce that I put together. Salt, pepper, and then a lot of olive oil. You say, wow, that's a lot of olive oil, but olive oil is a food. It's not an oil. So
I agree.
You sop it up with your bread. So we're gonna heat that up because I kind of got it made already. And then earlier, I got the eggplant. It's an eggplant dish. So we got the eggplant prepared. I leave the skin on the eggplant, or I was taught to leave the skin on the eggplant, because when it comes together, it could be really soft, and without the skin, it kind of keeps it together. And I'll show you what I mean when I put it all together.
Okay.
But we'll get this going. We're going to add the pine nuts to our sauteed onions. I already sauteed the onions. I'm going to put a little parsley in there. So you just you don't want to caramelize the onion. You want it to be just kind of cooked through, kind of loosen. We're gonna get that. You can maybe hear the sizzling. And I'm going to add now celery. Okay, so the dish itself, it probably has a Spanish origin, and it was made with tuna back maybe 500 years ago. But tuna is very expensive, and through the years, I'm sure the recipe changed.